not pay our bills?
Well,
Not really.
What are we saying?
say it again, Mr. Murphy.
To inform them that there has been discussion amongst council, the idea of what it would take to get some of these fixed and get some movement on the contract. And if they have to consider withholding payment until we get some movement, that's something that was discussed.
Just vague enough.
I think, may I say something?
Sure.
I think the city staff should get a contract with them. If they can't, we'll get different city staff. I think that's the problem. I know I could call them and get a contract before noon tomorrow. I know I could. I'd call the CEO. I've done it before for the city, a couple times. So I know I can do it. Anybody from city staff that doesn't think I did that before, let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Trost. Is there any, where are we leaving it here, Mr. Coop? I mean,
I don't know.
your, Mr. Murphy's
Now, we're kind of
explanation.
going on to the realm of nonsense now. No, I'm not for this, if this means that we want to fire the entire city staff,
Well,
and we don't want to pay our bills, and,
Really, the question is,
well, I'm not sure what the question
well,
is
I'll
here.
try and narrow it down for you. Would we be willing to give Mr. Murphy the authority to talk to them in light of the conversation that we've just had? Now, Mr. Coop or Mr. Trost has, of course, taken it to another level, which we're not going to discuss that. That is not part of what this consensus is about. Are we going to give city staff direction to talk to Xcel Energy with the ability, if you will, to say that we as a council have discussed this and are willing to perhaps withhold payment if they're not going to give us a contract? That's putting it a little simpler than Mr. Murphy. I'm sure he would use more political language than we would, but or polite, I should say.
What would we do if somebody says, I'm going to withhold taxes from my payments to the city? Because I have a number of complaints, and I'm going to withhold my taxes until such time that the city signs a contract and/or complies with my wishes. What would we do in a situation like that?
Well, this is a different situation. That's kind of an apples and oranges thing. This is a service that these folks are supposed to provide. They are under contract with us. Is there some vagueness about the contract? Is there some difficulty in getting them to move on the contract, even if it has been signed? I mean, we're talking about a signed contract.
Well,
here.
the Public Works Superintendent Bay, he can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it has, I believe, part of it has to do with the timing of when some of these came in, as far as if with new developments and new streets. Typically, the more recent ones have contracts, the older ones do not, especially in the original part of the city and throughout that. So, Mr. Ray, is that correct?
That's correct. It all depends on who had the work done. And if it's Xcel Energy itself does not do the contract work, they don't have a contract with the city. If this guy puts the lights in and they don't have anything to do with putting the lights in, they don't have the diagrams, they don't have nothing, they don't do it, which we weren't aware of till after the fact. So everybody's doing it for the cheapest they can do it.
So, in certain parts of the city, we're probably held to having to fix them ourselves.
That's what I started doing last month because of the complaints of a couple lights.
Okay. And we don't have
we-
the equipment to do,
We don't have the bucket truck, we have to hire it out.
right. And these are the older lights typically.
No,
Oh.
these are new lights.
Oh, what's the lifespan of a light? How often do you have to,
That I can't tell you, I don't know.
is it every couple of years? I mean, is it costing us a bundle?
It seems that we have a couple of lights that are constantly going out and that I wasn't aware of, so. That's,
Okay.
we have chronic lights that are going out, they need to be addressed. I'm not aware of them.
Mayor,
Yes,
may I
Mr.
make a
Post.
comment?
Sure.
Two comments, I guess. One, this issue with Xcel and what services they'll provide for street lighting is a metro-wide problem now. And the reason is because many cities are in Belle Plaine situation where the belief was developer installed lights, Xcel serviced in terms of energy services lights and would also service the ballast and the fixture, and that was often the case. But what's occurred, it's a different issue than you have, is that the cost of that service did not include replacement cost. Ancillary cities, Eden Prairie comes to mind, where the city's paid for a long time the service cost, the service streetlights, but that cost has not gone to replacement value, and now the city's going to have to replace hundreds and hundreds of streetlights at significant expense. So there are a number of issues now with Excel in providing service. They have made the decision, though, as Alan said, that they are not in the business generally of providing that service. There are other vendors that will do it, but Excel is not holding itself out as being in that business. The other thing is with respect to making payments, the city certainly cannot make payment if the payment obligation is disputed. If you don't believe you've received the service that you were paying for, you can withhold payment. The city, though, is statutorily required to make payments that are undisputed. The city cannot withhold payments if there is no dispute about the service having been provided.
Thank you for that. So it basically puts us back in more of a conversation about whether the contract is valid for particular lights or how we're going to approach this chronic situation and whether or not we're going to, as a city, bear the cost of, if some of these things are just going to be, it sounds like Eden Prairie. Is that just a regular maintenance kind of replacement where, the lights are a certain age and they just go in and replace them? Is that what that is?
Yeah, a lot of development, as council members know, occurred in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and streetlights were installed with, I think, typically 30-plus years useful life. There wasn't, at the time, the thought about replacement cost, which is not insignificant, and those lights in many developments are coming up to the end of their useful life and will have to be replaced en masse, and there was no slush fund created out of the payments made to the utilities to pay for the replacement, and so cities are going to be on the hook to spend hundreds and maybe more than hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace streetlights that they hadn't anticipated.
So this whole idea of an operating fund of sorts, was that an understanding among the cities, and they assumed that was what was going on with the utility, that they were banking this money for future replacement or for replacement costs, and
Yeah.
it just never happened?
Mayor and council members, I know a little bit about this because we represent the Suburban Rate Authority, which represents 30-some cities around the metro, and that is the position that the Suburban Rate Authority has taken, is that there was an expectation that the service cost included a future maintenance and replacement element, and so that unanticipated expense really was unanticipated by the cities. That's been disputed at the Public Utilities Commission, and we could talk about that another time, but it's not been resolved at this point in the city's favor.
Interesting. Thank you, Mr. Bose.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Would it possibly behoove us then just to drop the contract and do our own thing with a private